Hi, hello, welcome or welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my February TBRs, my February hopefuls. This is quite the list, so I'm not hoping to get to all of them, but these are just some of the books that are on my TBR for February and March. These are the ones that I absolutely want to get to as soon as possible. So if you haven't already, grab a drink, grab a snack, get cozy, and let's dive into it. Now these are in no particular order. I have a Q bookshelf on my Goodreads account and I just toss them all in there. So we're just kind of going through by whatever pops up first. But like I said, no rhyme or reason to it. Number one on my list is The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. And the Goodreads description of it says, "It is a brilliantly funny novel about friends, lovers, Ireland and chaos, and a young woman desperately trying to manage all three." So basically what I'm gathering, it's a college student who kind of has a love at first sight interaction, meets a friend, meets a love interest, and it just kind of follows her throughout that process. It's definitely literary fiction, and recently I've wanted to get into more literary fiction, so this one just seemed like a good one to start with. And I know there's just been a lot of buzz about it, so I'm excited to dive into that one soon. Number two on my list is The English Understand Wool by Helen DeWitt. Basically how this one has been described to me is it was basically a dissection of what it means to be wealthy and to be rich. And it follows a 17-year-old girl through that. I really don't know too much about this one, but I've heard that the writing is phenomenal. It's another literary fiction book and I've just heard people rave about it, so I'm really excited to dive into it. Like I said, I don't know too much about it. I think it mainly focuses on this girl and her life and the wealthy elite, and I assume something happens and we get to follow her through it, being raised in this wealthy family and to now kind of going forth in whatever scenario she's thrown into. I'm gonna try and use some synonyms in this video because in my most recent one I said predictable like 18 times. If you haven't seen that video, it'll be linked somewhere, but you should go check it out. And I have noticed that I also do that with like excited and pumped. So we're gonna try and use some different words here. I'm a reader, I can do it. The next one on this list is How to Hide in Plain Sight by Emma Noyes, I think is how it's said. This book is very much focused on a family and the main character hasn't talked to her family in a long time, but she's coming back, I think, for a wedding or some big family function. And it just follows her as she navigates having not spoken to her family in a long time because of a certain incident, how she interacts with them now. Sign me up. Sounds great. I wouldn't say this is necessarily literary fiction. I think this is more contemporary, but again, another book that strays from my typical fantasy realm. So clearly I'm branching out with these books. Number four on this list, even though there is no order, is The Bright Sword by Leigh Grossman. Basically, this is a King Arthur retelling, except for by the time our main character arrives, King Arthur has already passed. And so we get to follow our main character as they deal with this present day personification of Camelot and, you know, the whole King Arthur storyline. And I don't think I've actually read the original King Arthur Camelot Knights of the Round Table story. And I'm excited to see this book's take on it and then likely go back to the original and kind of see the source material and what inspired this. The cover is also absolutely stunning. So that had no part in me choosing this, but it's always a perk when a book you want to read also has a stunning cover. The next one on my list is the second book in the Mistborn trilogy, The Well of Ascension. I read Mistborn, I want to say back in November, and it actually took me quite a long time to get through it. I think I just read it at a point where I couldn't get as immersed in it as I wanted to, and so it read pretty slow for me, and so I think that's what I struggled with. I also didn't have time to just sit down and like get through it and, you know, get the momentum through the story. But I've heard phenomenal things about Brandon Sanderson. I feel like everybody who is in the reading space knows his name, and I definitely want to give this trilogy the attention that it's worth, so I will definitely be continuing. And so this is another highly anticipated book on my February/March, I guess, TBR. So if you don't know, Mistborn is a fantastical world where there are specific metals that give people different powers, different abilities, and so we follow our main character, Vin, who's an orphan, as she kind of navigates through that world, ends up with this crazy found family gang type team, and they try and save the world from this evil emperor. And then from there, stuff gets wild. Next on this list is the Belladonna series by Adalyn Grace. I don't know too much about this one, but I've heard amazing things about it, so I'm excited to kind of go in pretty blind to this and see how I like it, see what it's all about, and see if the hype is worth it. Next, I have a shorter book in This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal, el-mohtar, and Max Gladstone. The way I understand this book is it is like two time-traveling agents like going on this mission, and just we're kind of dissecting the relationship between them. There's multiple timelines in this book, so a letter will say something like burn before reading, and it just talks all about, you know, time loops. Feels very multiverse, but I'm sure it's its own thing completely. And I've heard people either love this one or hate this one, but it's pretty interesting to me. I am looking forward to kind of diving into the chaos that it seems like this world is, and just kind of the mental gymnastics that this world, I'm sure, will put me through. And I am so ready. I'm so excited for that, just being able to see the complexity that this world is, just from what I've gleaned from the description. So I think it'll be a fun time. The next one is How to Inhabit Time by James K.A. Smith. This book was actually purchased by one of my friends as a gift for me. Shout out to Brielle. Love you. Thank you so much. And it has been on my list for a while, and it just talks about being present in the moment, not being so focused on the past or the future, and how we can just stay in lockstep with the spirit in that. So it's a Christian book, and I'm super excited about it. Next, I have Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent. I believe she also writes The Serpent and the Wings of Night. That's another series by her. But I have heard Daughter of No Worlds compared to Throne of Glass. I've heard a lot of people say that it is the closest series that comes to that series. And so obviously that is a very high mantle. There is a lot of weight on this series. I've heard it's phenomenal. And it is a series that I want to get to very soon and kind of judge it for myself and see how it measures up to an amazing immersive fantasy series that is Throne of Glass. You know, that's high praise to say it kind of goes toe-to-toe with Throne of Glass. I mean, I think most people would say that Throne of Glass is a little bit above it, but I mean, a series that is like it, gives people the same feelings as Throne of Glass. Sign me up. It's on this list for a reason. Next is The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. This book was described as a contemporary fantasy, and from what I understand, basically books are all open doors. And there is our main character, Cassie, and she works at a library, or she works at a bookstore, and she meets this collector who's collecting very mysterious, powerful tomes. And so she kind of gets thrust into this world, and she is kind of chased down by some people also hunting for these very specific tomes and old books. And sounds like a wild ride and sounds very interesting. It kind of reminds me a little bit of The Midnight Library, just from the premise of, you know, books holding all of this power and being so whimsical and magical. And so sounds pretty great. Next is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. Basically, it is a fantasy set in the Spanish Golden Age. From what I've gleaned, it sounds like it is England and Spain warring against one another, and we follow this seemingly ordinary girl who kind of gets thrust into all of it. I've heard some people love this book or really don't like this book, so I'm interested to see my thoughts on it, because obviously Leigh Bardugo wrote the Shadow and Bone series and Six of Crows. I read those both. I really did enjoy Shadow and Bone, but Six of Crows honestly just takes the cake. I think she did a phenomenal job kind of unpacking the world more in the duology than she did in the trilogy. And Six of Crows just feels a bit older. I know people who are ride or die for that series. I mean, rightly so. It's fantastic. So I am intrigued to see how Leigh Bardugo writes in a new world, because all three of her previous series, Shadow and Bone, Six of Crows, and King of Scars duology, is all set in the Grishaverse, and seeing her embark into a new world will be fascinating. So I'm excited to see what she does in this new world. Next is the Threads That Bind series by Kika Hatzopoulou. The description says, in a world where the children of the gods inherit their powers, a descendant of the Greek faiths must solve a series of impossible murders to save her sisters, her soulmate, and her city. Descendants of the Fates are always born in threes, one to weave, one to draw, one to cut the threads that connect people to the things they love and to life itself. Sold. So I'm hoping in this one we get a lot of Greek mythology and we just kind of get that sense, you know, that sense that Percy Jackson gave you almost, but with a new spin on it. So it sounds wonderful. It sounds like it's gonna be that mix of Greek mythology and murder mystery from the rest of the description. So you really can't go wrong with that. So it's on this list. Next, I have Gilded Ashes by Rosamund Hodge. I read Cruel Beauty a few years ago, and that book was kind of a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it was like nothing you could ever think about Beauty and the Beast. Like, take whatever you know about it and throw it away, throw it out the window. You think you know Beauty and the Beast, and you do, but this book is gonna go way off the tracks. And so Gilded Ashes is a Cinderella retelling, and so I am stoked to get into this one and see if Hodge is able to do to Cinderella what they already did with Beauty and the Beast. Next is the For the Wolf series by Hannah Whitten. I have seen this book at Barnes & Noble. Every time I go, it's sitting like right on the table by the fantasy section, and I've almost picked it up so many times, but of course, gotta stay to my pillars of reading and my reading philosophy, and so I cannot pick that up yet, but the wait at the library is outrageous. It's so long. So it is a book that I'm waiting for and very, very, very heavily anticipating. I've just heard spectacular things about it, and if I'm not mistaken, it is a Red Riding Hood retelling. So clearly I'm on something with these retellings. I'm really fascinated by them as of late, so I've got a lot on my list that I'm looking forward to. Next is the Daughter of the Moon Goddess trilogy by Sue Lynn Tan. And basically in this story, our main character is hiding from the Celestial Emperor who wants her because of her power. So one day her power kind of flares up and her location is revealed. So basically she is on the run, you know, trying to stay safe. And she ends up seizing an opportunity to train in archery and her magic to kind of, you know, grow stronger and protect herself. And the fun thing about this one is that it is an adaptation of the legend of Chang'e, the Chinese moon goddess, where basically a young woman is on a quest to free her mother, which pits her against the most powerful immortal in the realm. Again, another retelling. Like I said, clearly something about the retellings is really speaking to me lately, but I know when this book came out, there was a lot of hype around it, and the second book has come out and is released, and I think there is a novella and then there is another book set to release in the same world, but I think it follows different characters. Next is Vespertine by Margaret Rogerson. Basically, there are these Grey Sisters who are nuns that are tasked with cleansing the bodies of the deceased so that their souls can pass on. Otherwise, those spirits kind of become ravenous and interfere with the mortal world. And then as our main character is working, going about her business, her convent is attacked by possessed soldiers, and so she's gonna investigate, see what's going on, and so she kind of delves deeper into the magic of it all to try and figure out what is going on, what's happening, and stop it. Another book I've seen a lot of hype for. Originally when I saw this book, I thought it was something to do with vampires, maybe because like Vespertine, the V, I just put that 2 and 2 together and got 5 instead of 4. But it sounds fascinating and it's on the list. And last on this list is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Laini wrote the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series, which I read a few years ago and I really, really loved. It took me a while when I was reading that series to realize that it was a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but she uses the themes of Romeo and Juliet so subtly that obviously you can tell it's kind of a star-crossed lovers thing, but you don't realize how much of a star-crossed lovers theme it is until, at least for me, until the last book. So she does a great job of kind of weaving those themes in and being really, really subtle about it. Because when I first started reading the series, it was more focused kind of on her found family and her kind of discovering who she is and kind of investigating some crazy stuff that's going on in her world. But that was a phenomenal series. I loved reading it. It might be one I'd actually consider rereading. So it might go on my TBRR. I don't think it is, but it might. So I don't want to butcher this, so I'm gonna just read the description from Goodreads. The dream chooses the dreamer, not the other way around, and Laszlo Strange, war orphan and junior librarian, has always feared that his dream chose poorly. Since he was 5 years old, he's been obsessed with the mythic lost city of Weep, but it would take someone bolder than he to cross half the world in search of it. Then a stunning opportunity presents itself in the person of a hero called the Godslayer and a band of legendary warriors. and he has to seize his chance or lose his dream forever. What happened in Weep 200 years ago to cut it off from the rest of the world? What exactly did the Godslayer slay that went by the name of God? And what is the mysterious problem he now seeks help in solving? The answers await in Weep. So, feels very, I walked through this random doorway one random Tuesday evening and now I'm in a completely different world. I have no idea what's going on and I have to navigate it. That's what Strange the Dreamer feels like to me. And there's something so fun about kind of experiencing a brand new world at the same time as the character, you know, when they're just kind of thrust into something very like Alice in Wonderland, where she falls down the rabbit hole and she's kind of figuring out where the heck she is, how the heck the world works, and so are we right alongside her. So that wraps up all the books I have on my immediate TBR that I want to get to as soon as possible. If I had to choose one that I really want to get to above all the others, it would definitely be The Threads That Bind. I am so fascinated by that world and so ready to dive into it. So please let me know if any of these books are also on your TBR, or if you have a completely different set of books or books that you really want to get to. What is your #1 anticipated read for 2025, or even just your most anticipated next book on your TBR? But thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again soon.